What do you do when the person who raised you starts lying for money? He learned the hard way and documented everything. It started with a simple message, "Hey, I need a huge favor." My dad texted me around 11:30 de la noche one Thursday night. He said his work had cut his hours drastically, and he was a few days away from eviction. He froze for a moment reading it. They never asked me for that kind of help before. Fault here and there, sure. Help starting his old truck, yeah. But full rent coverage? That was serious. He replied asking how much he was short. He said, $600 should cover the rest. I'm waiting to hear back about more shifts, they promise next week should be full. He hesitated, but I always fear the worst with rent issues. Once that notice goes out, it often spirals. He sent it the next morning. He thanked me a few hours later and said he was lucky to have me. He felt solid about the decision. At that point, I didn't see a reason to question him. But I kept the text. It felt transactional in a way. No extra conversation after. That struck me a bit. Normally, they call, make a small joke, ask about my day. Instead, it was straight to the facts and gone. He rationalized it, maybe he was stressed. Everyone reacts differently to financial pressure. Rent support turned into something more familiar too fast. Waiting 2 weeks, he asked again. This time it was less calm. Can you help again? They still haven't restored hours. I'm so behind, and I haven't eaten much. He was surprised by how quickly things moved from rent to what sounded like basic needs. He asked him specifically, how come you're still not getting shifts? Didn't they say next week things would stabilize? He replied, they lied. Said one thing, did another. My radar quietly turned on. Something about the tone was urgent, but vague. That's when doubt first showed up. He asked if I could bring some groceries over instead. I said it wasn't about groceries, it was about owing back rent fees. Late penalties. Desperation is hard to fake, I thought, and this felt pressing. 400 pesos more this time. He was already in for $1,000. Again, he thanked me short and sweet. No extra conversation. I looked back at both transfers and noticed he hadn't once offered any confirmation like a receipt, landlord message, or anything trackable. I thought about asking, but I didn't want to make it seem like I didn't trust him, not yet. Not without something solid. But this time, I wrote everything down by date, amount, and attached screenshots. He remembered something a lawyer once said offhandedly, when money moves in families, document it. Clarity protects everyone. I didn't think they need protection, but still, I documented. What you start to notice, once your eyes shift, is the patterns. I use the same phrases in every new request. They cut again. It's worse than last week. Landlord is flipping out. It wasn't just repetition, it was manufactured urgency. I didn't say anything directly. Instead, I asked questions. Do you want me to call and negotiate with your landlord? Sometimes they waive fees if another party steps in. I said, that's too embarrassing. Handle it. Later, I asked if he needed help reworking his budget. Maybe there were county programs or tenant relief. Programs are useless, he said. They just take your info and don't call back. Yet every time I gently shifted toward solutions, he pulled things back to a single action I could take: send money. That's when I pulled his name through a background check tool I already had access to through work. Nothing criminal, just for understanding. There was a past due account from a casino rewards program from a nearby city. Not proof, but strange. Curiosity started to grow into concern. He still hadn't seen a lease, or even proof of missed hours. Something was off. I didn't say no yet, but I also didn't send more. He began to sit with my questions instead of silencing them. He knew something was coming, I just didn't know what yet. I didn't send anything that week, and he didn't follow up. That was odd. Usually, his requests came in regular pattern. Silence felt like a signal. He quietly reached out to someone I knew who worked near where my dad's last job had been. I asked vaguely about how the company was doing, knowing he might mention if layoffs happened, or didn't they. He said nothing about cut shifts. In fact, he said, I think they've been hiring. That was my first hard conflict with the story. My dad told me his hours were down to 2 days a week. This person said as far as he knew, my dad hadn't shown up for almost a month. And that they quit, not been cut. That hit me differently. Lying about hours is one thing. Saying you were laid off when you walked. That's a bigger level. He thanked the guy for the info, told him not to say anything, and wrote that down too. Now I had external validation on the first inconsistency. He didn't accuse my dad. He still hadn't made conclusions. I followed the hedge rule, don't confront without documentation. So I opened a new folder and labeled it rent requests. Everything went in there. If there was more, I wanted a full picture before I said even one word. That's when I checked his public records. In our state, you can see small claims disputes through a basic online portal. Valid identification? Just name and county. What came up was hard to read, 3 listed cases in the past 6 months, all related to gambling debts and unpaid personal loans. 2 had plaintiff names that clearly represented loan firms that cater to high-risk gambling extensions. This wasn't this small. This was a pattern. Used weeks before he asked me for money, one of those cases had been filed. My hands didn't shake, but my stomach pulled inward. He still didn't say anything to him. He followed the documentation path. He printed the cases, took screenshots of the summaries, and filed each neatly. I didn't even feel anger yet. He felt detached. Strategic, in a way. Every detail told a story that removed all guesswork. He still had a question though, how recent was his gambling activity? Was this old behavior, or ongoing? He searched his name online with local casinos. He checked social media tags. I looked at his check-ins, which they often shared on Facebook in the past. One stood out. Used 4 days after I sent him the first $600, he checked in at a casino about 40 minutos away. Caption said, trying to turn things around botón de repetir punto. That was the moment I realized the full breach. He wasn't just bending the truth, he was funding risk through my belief in him. Still, I didn't react. He took a screenshot, printed the post, added timestamps. The evidence was clear. But I wasn't here for confrontation. He was here for protection. The plan I followed included the most important rule yet, don't act on assumption. Act on data. And everything was now confirmed by outside, third-party tools. He had proof. That was the line I waited for. At that point, the silence between us became part of the pattern. My dad hadn't reached back out for more money yet, but I sensed that another request was coming. He stayed quiet and just kept tracking. He also noticed that our conversations had narrowed down to only financial moments, requests and replies. There were no casual messages anymore, no questions about how I was, no updates about his situation beyond new stress points. That, in itself, was another signal. He thought back to how our relationship used to function. At one point, he was unusually attentive, even supportive. But maybe that was always in cycles of dependency. He decided to go through my old bank transactions over the last 2 years and filter by his name. The total hit harder than I expected. He had sent him over $5,000 since that earlier period, never all at once, but incrementally. Little by little. Rent was just the most recent label. That put something clearer into my awareness, this wasn't sudden. It was an extended pattern masked by trust. I collected every screenshot, payment note, message backup, and dated them all. He didn't think of this as building a case, I framed it as building clarity. No assumptions. No revenge. Used truths. Because if this ever came up in a legal or family situation, I never wanted to be the one scrambling to recall facts. The facts were now organized. Then came the third request. He phrased it like it would be the absolute last time. His message used phrases like I hate asking again and I swear I'll figure it out after this. The amount he asked for was smaller, $250. I think he assumed that a lower number wouldn't trigger the same mental resistance. But by now, I had already made my decision, no more money. Not without explanation, not without transparency, not after everything he discovered. The hard part wasn't the choice, it was the delivery. I wrote a calm, neutral response and rewrote it 3 times. In the final version, I said, I've been tracking what I've sent over the past month and I'm not in a place to continue helping financially without a clear understanding of what's happening. You don't need to explain everything, but I'm hitting a financial wall myself and can't send more. He replied within minutes. The message was just, wow. Okay. You remember that. No anger, no attempt to clarify. He didn't challenge what I said, didn't ask what I knew. Used closed the conversation off like a door slamming. He screenshotted everything again. This new response was less about the money and more about control. He had lost control of a lever they pulled for months. And maybe longer. For me, the silence after that was validation. He didn't chase him. He let things settle while I reorganized my own budget. Protecting yourself means letting discomfort sit where it belongs, outside of your wallet and outside your day-to-day peace. After the silence, things began moving behind the scenes. He started hearing from other family members. It wasn't intentional, they didn't know what I was experiencing. But the overlap was impossible to ignore. One cousin mentioned in a group thread that my dad had called her a few weeks ago in real trouble, short on cash after losing something valuable. She said she'd helped, but had a strange feeling after. They never followed up or even acknowledged the transfer again. That was red flag number 1. Then an uncle casually noted how generous he'd been at a card game the month before, spreading out $100 bills like it was nothing. He didn't react. He just took mental notes and added dates to my files where relevant. Context was building, quietly and independently. None of what I learned had come from confrontation. This was all documentation. I revisited the lawyer I'd spoken to before, not because I was planning to sue or press charges, but because I wanted to understand where my lines of liability ended. It clarified that without written repayment terms, most of the money they'd given was legally considered a family gift. That stung. But it also taught me something deeply valuable: clarity must come before generosity. He left that meeting with no interest in punishing my dad. He just wanted boundaries moving forward that were enforceable, respectful, and repeatable. This wasn't about burning bridges, it was about reinforcing exits. He thought long and hard about next steps. Not emotionally, strategically. He followed the hedge principle of not confronting without proof. But now that the proof was more than sufficient, I had to ask myself, what did resolution actually look like? Did I want a confession? An apology? Or did I just want peace and prevention? The answer was the last one. So I drafted one final message, direct and emotion-free. It read, going forward, I won't be sending money anymore. If you need help in non-financial ways, program guidance, transportation arrangements, food bank contacts, I'm open to talking. But I have to prioritize financial sustainability and honesty. I attached a copy of a debt support referral sheet they researched weeks earlier. That was important. According to professionals, if you cut off support without suggesting alternatives, it can trigger escalation. But where there's structure, there is less volatility. His reply came 3 days later, I'm dealing with things in my own way. He didn't ask for judgment. That was his entire statement. It said a lot in very few words. He read it a few times, trying to decide whether to respond. In the end, I didn't. Not out of malice, but because the only thing left to say had already been made clear. Documentation had given me peace, and silence was the end I had chosen. He updated my file with the exchange, saved it to a backup drive, and lived on without waiting for a better ending. After that final message, the relationship entered a different phase, a quieter one. We no longer spoke weekly, and the financial request stopped completely. At least to me. Whether or not others were still being asked, I didn't know, and truthfully, I didn't have the energy to investigate Ebedione's story. He had my own to recover from. The emotional intensity hadn't broken me, but it had drained something. Not just trust, but belief. There is something heavy about realizing the same person who taught you hard work could fake an entire scenario to funnel your support into something as reckless as gambling. He didn't feel hatred. Weirdly, I felt grief. Not just for the money I'd lost, but for the image of stability I thought my father represented. That grief made me pause. It reminded me of hedge principle number 2, emotional exhaustion is real if you go at it alone. So I did something I hadn't done before, I talked to someone. Not a therapist yet, but an advisor I trusted. Someone older, un emocional, private. He explained the entire situation, not to vent but to validate. His response, you didn't fail him. He failed to be honest with you. Boundaries are love when trust is gone. That stuck with me. I wasn't cutting him off. I was giving the relationship a new wall, a new frame. No more loans. Just barely structured communication. That was the only version that could exist without debt, emotional or financial. I began building what I call my parallel life. It was something they often heard from professionals working with family boundary issues: build something that is not dependent on the toxic part of the family. A version of your identity that doesn't include waiting for them to change. So I redesigned habits. I took budgeting more seriously, no longer to have enough to give if needed, but to secure myself. I spent time forming stronger relationships with friends and distant relatives who gave without taking. I focused on building credibility, at work, in social situations, and even in my digital footprint. Every area where I showed logic, clarity, consistency, it built a version of myself I could trust, so that I wouldn't collapse under accusation, gaslighting, or emotional demands. When you've been lied to by someone you love, your entire decision-making compass can get knocked off. I had to rebuild mine with data, not feelings. I still checked in on my dad from time to time, but the rules were clear. No money. No vague emergencies. If he shared anything, it had to come with proof or specifics. I didn't police him. He just reflected his energy based on facts. I eventually stopped trying altogether, and while that sounds sad, it was actually peaceful. If someone can't reach you without a lie, you've exited the cycle. And that's healing. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet and firm. Months later, a cousin reached out and said, "Your dad seems different lately." I didn't ask what that meant. He just nodded, said I hoped he was doing well, and kept moving forward. In private, I did a small search and noticed something interesting. One of the loan cases I had tracked earlier had been marked settled. That could mean anything. Paid off. Written off. Negotiated. I didn't read too much into it. I wasn't waiting for recovery or restitution anymore. I had learned not to tie my healing to someone else's reform. If improvement was happening, it wasn't directed at me, and that was okay. Sometimes, people begin to change only when enough doors stop opening for them. I wasn't interested in forcing an apology. That would be centered the whole journey on him again. What I had now was space. Controlled contact, zero debt, and no resentment, a combination I didn't think was possible when I first opened my wallet in Chapter 1. I began sharing parts of my story, in safe, anonymous settings, more to help others understand the patterns than to get sympathy. So many stories follow the same shape: trust, loophole, guilt, withdrawal, realization. But not many people talk about what it looks like to exit cleanly. Truthfully, it was the documentation that had saved me. Not confrontation. Not yelling. Not emotional explosion. Used data. Calm epiphanies. Boundaries applied with surgical precision. That became my new model for dealing with manipulation I didn't see coming. Reflecting on everything, I came to one final realization: it wasn't just about the money. It was about distorted truth. About misplaced roles. I had become my father's financial safety net, but without agreement. Without parameters. And when I stopped, the fallout didn't explode, it just faded. That taught me one of the most sobering lessons in adult family dynamics: sometimes you don't get justice. You get space. And space is enough. He had no perfect ending here. My father didn't suddenly recover, get clean, apologize, or repay the amount owed. What I got was more basic, and maybe more important. He got to keep my life. My budget stabilized. My trust in my own decisions improved. My mind stopped spiraling around half-truths. I now live with systems in place that prevent this from ever repeating. Accountability tools, financial visibility, written agreements if needed, even with family. Healing wasn't dramatic. It just felt like turning down a constant alarm that once blared in my mind. And staying off the battlefield entirely, not pretending to win, was the victory itself. Today, when people ask me about family loyalty, I use a different word: responsibility. Loyalty without boundaries becomes silent codependency. Responsibility means showing up with clarity, helping where help can do good, and stepping back when enabling becomes the greater harm. I don't speak badly about my dad. I say what's true: we're in limited contact now. I help how I can. And sometimes that means choosing not to help. That's all I owe to anyone. The rest belongs to silence, to files I no longer open, to lessons I won't have to learn again. If I could share anything useful from all this, it's this: always document before you get emotional. Always wait before you respond. And always protect your credibility, because it's the only thing manipulators can't rewrite. I have no peace offering to give, no rage left to vent. What I have is structure, quiet, rational, real. That became my survival strategy. And in the end, it was the calm I chose over chaos that saved me. If you've ever faced this in your family, you're not alone. Tachuela de pizarrón de corcho, comment below if this hit home. Campana subscribe for more stories that say what others stay silent about.